this conversation will be about leadership. The whole topic is called D2C Leadership. It talks about the new guard. It will deep dive into what it takes to massively scale a D2C company through the various stages of growth and into the public sector. So I'd love to introduce Matt Peterson, head of enterprise and publisher sales for Outbrain. Matt, I'll let you take the reins from here. I would love if
Thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, I would love if you could start by telling us a bit about Outbrain first, so just so we have the context, and then welcome in our incredible panelists. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So Outbrain, to keep it short and sweet, is a native advertising platform, the world's largest native advertising platform. We work with a myriad of publishers, premium publishers like CNN and Washington Post and Meredith and Hearst, and provide the native technology for brand advertisers to access audiences within that platform. So it's a massively scalable ecosystem that provides sort of that connection between audiences, users, brands, marketers, to bring that conversation full suite and hopefully hit all of the goals that marketers are tasking us with. So I would like to introduce my panel as well. So we have joining us Heidi Zach, who's the co-founder and CEO of ThirdLove, Joe Megibow as the CEO of Purple, as well as Hilary Coles, who's the co-founder and VP of merchandising for Hims and Hers. Everybody, welcome. Thank you guys for joining us. And I'm super excited about this panel. I myself am a former co-founder of a company. We were an acquisition that Outbrain made a number of years ago. So this all hits, pretty close to home for me. I don't think I can claim my panel, or excuse me, my company has been nearly as successful as yours, but I'm really excited to dig in to understand more about how you've led your companies through, different levels of hyper growth and really sort of affected change in consumer behavior and disrupted, relatively well-established industries. So to jump right in and to put this all in the context of what a year from a global pandemic and civil and political unrest, the list seems to go on and on about, how atypical, maybe read stressful 2020 has been for everyone. And it goes without saying that all of these things have had material impacts on consumer behavior as well as kind of the normal business dealings. And one massive benefit that I've always thought that D2Cs have had in the ecosystem is this sort of very digital first mindset. And as everything has shifted online, especially in the wake of COVID, direct to consumer types of companies and brands have been that much more prepared for this surge of activity, to say that. So while that's very true, it's also probably accelerated the growth and entry of more traditional non-digital first types of brands into that same ecosystem, with maybe slightly decreasing kind of the edge that direct-to-consumer brands have typically had. So I'm excited to dig in with the group here and really understand what's the secret sauce, from these founders and leaders of these great companies. So thank you guys all for joining. So this has been, 2020 in general has been a task, to say that. But it's also provided opportunities. And I think one of the things that has really come to the forefront of the conversation, the corporate conversation in many cases, is how to incorporate better diversity and inclusion within the narrative and sort of the brand organization and conversation. So Heidi, I'd love to kick this off with you with a question. I know ThirdLove has an awesome program called the TL Effect. I think you just nominated your first recipient. I'd love for you to give everybody a little bit more detail as to that program, and then more broadly, how are you considering D&I within kind of the corporate context?
Yeah, so I think similar to everyone else, when things really started heating up in May and June, and all of the conversations were really happening, especially across social platforms. It was a very intense time as a leader to try to figure out, like, how are we responding? Are we releasing statistics? Are we donating money? What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How do we make sure that, we show we care, right? Which we all do. And so that was really interesting, because I think my lesson learned there was I had to really kind of take a step back and tell our company we weren't going to do anything like that week or even the next week. Like, we had to get our act together and be thoughtful. And that was really, really hard. And some of our team didn't like that very much. And they wanted that immediacy in responding. But I do think it was the better decision to wait. So meaning we did things like focused on external and internal. So externally, what we had decided was, instead of donating money to a cause, which a lot of companies did, we developed this program called TL Effect, where we choose a female founder of color each quarter. We give her a $20,000 grant. We promote her business through our platforms. We give her mentorship, both through me and then our ThirdLove team, and really try to do this every 3 to 6 months. We're still figuring out the cadence. So we picked our first winner, really exciting. Cutie Nails, Era Sim, she's awesome. And so we just picked her and announced it. So that's like our external D&I program. And I just felt like it was important to do something that would continue, that would be ongoing versus like a one-time thing. And then second to that was really internal D&I. And so to really come up with our strategies, we want to go back to our team. So we surveyed our team. We did a belonging and inclusion survey. We figured out those areas where our team felt like we should focus time and resources. So similar to a lot of companies, on recruiting, diversifying the pipeline, mentorship internally, and in some other initiatives like that. And so I guess as a leader, again, the biggest learning there was, sometimes in order to create the best possible programs, you have to kind of push back and say, look, this is going to take us 2 months. Like, I don't have an answer. I don't even know what to tell you. And no, I can't do an interview and talk about it right now because I don't know, and that's really hard to do. But I think that was the right call for us.
Yeah, and you feel that in the marketplace, right? It's so palpable that to have that knee-jerk reaction is so easy to do, I think, in some respects. So to, take that more internally and understand what is the message, what is the way to convey how we do feel about how important this issue is, and do so in an appropriate way is not the easiest thing to do. So, I mean, I think kudos to your teams for doing that. Hilary, I see you're nodding your head alongside as well. Would love to open that question up to you as well, as far as how you're incorporating D&I in the culture and kind of even your brand marketing messages.
Yeah, I mean, it's an extremely timely topic, obviously, for this year, and agree with a ton of what Heidi was saying. Big fan of the TL Effect grant program as well. We also thought about it in an internal and external way as well. And 2 programs that have been real game changers for us have been, internally, we moved to a remote first office situation within the first couple of weeks, actually, of the pandemic. And that has allowed us to recruit top tier talent without the barrier of geography. And when you think about, as you're recruiting and developing pipeline for underrepresented groups, every barrier matters so much. And so removing that geographic barrier can be a massive, massive opening. And we've certainly seen that with the incredible superstars we've been able to bring on in the past 6 months. And then externally, I think, healthcare is possibly the last multi-trillion-dollar industry that hasn't been disrupted. And what we saw during COVID is telemedicine utilization went from 1% to 50% of all visits in 1 month. Like, that's crazy. And like so many other industries, what happens is that, the most resourced tend to be the ones to use those. But we need to think long-term about how low-income groups are going to be able to access telehealth in future. And so one thing that we've built over the past few months is called the Healthcare Equity Coalition. And that's a partnership of academics, NGOs, and industry. We're focused on driving telemedicine adoption in underserved communities, increasing trust, because again, these are the groups that have systemically been excluded from most healthcare institutions. And that's been another thing that we are taking a really long-term view on, similar to how Heidi and her team are approaching it. And then finally, I would just say the power that you have as a founder, I think, can be understated as well. And I think it's important for us to look, and I know, Matt, we talked about this during our prep call, but this is an all-white panel. And I think there's a lot of impact that we have as founders to push on that and say, what is the future we should be driving towards, and start to work with organizations and demanding that panels are diverse and representative of the population, because it really does start with us. And Heidi, as you were saying, as you were talking about Arat, I actually mentored her this summer for a little bit as well with Cutie Nails, which is just an incredible brand, and a plug for it because everyone should look it up. But I think it's so important as founders that we think about what our voices represent and stand for as well. So those are the three things that have really been on our minds.
Yeah, I couldn't have put it any better myself, Joe. To that end, and I think a lot of these consumer behaviors are trending, and in the line of thinking of D&I and how it's incorporated in corporate culture these days, do you think like consumer values are changing alongside that as well when it comes to even purchasing decisions or what brands to interact with?
Yeah, as it relates to diversity and inclusion, you mean?
Yeah.
It's a nuanced question for sure. And first of all, Heidi, Hilary, I love both your stories. Thank you for sharing. It's just amazing. But it's a nuanced question. We're growing in size to the point that we're getting a lot more mainstream. And as we go more mainstream, and our focus really is on a more premium offering around health, around better living, with what you see behind me here, this crazy purple stuff that we put into our mattresses. But there's nothing political about that. There's nothing on any end of the spectrum. Whatever your political leanings, whomever you voted for, who are we to say that they have more or less of a right to better health and better sleep and hopefully be better people. And as we've gone more mainstream, we've ended up a little more, call it centric in who our customer base is. We service likely just as many on both sides of the aisle, and in fact have advertised through all networks that lean differently and have seen pretty balanced response. Where we really are servicing, a broader customer base. Yeah, and that's challenging because whatever our own personal, as leaders, as employees, and we're based out of Utah, which is more of a red state. We're a manufacturer. We've got nearly 1,500 employees now, most of whom are hourly, and there's different viewpoints even within our own company. And Utah certainly is. Unlike some of the coastal states, or is a less diverse state just by the stats. Which creates even internal challenges on diversity. So I'd say the nuance is the customers are picking sides more. Everything has become political. Heidi talked about the quick reactions as this all began. We put out, largely for the employees, we put out a very quick statement, which I resisted doing, but I realized it wasn't for anyone other than my own employees. They needed to hear us say it out loud, and they needed to hear us say it publicly. So we put out a simple statement, which was just, racism is bad, watching, learning, mobilizing. I think that was exactly all we said, 6 words. And the response was horrifically divisive through social channels. It was amazing how much emotion and passion there was on both sides, from you're the best to I will never ever do business with you again. Just something as simple as that, because everything has gotten so divisive. And I think where consumers are looking, as this is my own opinion, is they're looking for opportunities to engage with brands that don't have to be political. And it's helped us refocus and realize, hey, the charities we choose to work with are going to be causes related to our fundamental mission, which is improving health and sleep. And that isn't by itself. There are political things, as you talk about homelessness or you talk about foster kids or things like that. But it's a different school of things that we can lean into. And I think, yeah, consumers are engaging against these divisive lines, but I think just piling onto the polar opposites right now is, I think, burning some customers out, and we've tried to find a way to just focus elsewhere.
I think that makes perfect sense. And you mentioned something that I want to dig into with a little more detail, and we talked about it a little bit during our prep call as well, is as leaders, as founders of now large companies, how do you separate what your voice is as that founder from what the brand message is? And I know, Heidi, you had some good thoughts on this when we chatted before, so I'll pass the mic to you to start.
Yeah, you mean specifically on just brand differentiation and in a crowded space?
I think there's that, but there's also sort of in this, maybe as the final D&I related question, you know, how do you separate the founder leadership voice from this is the brand message?
Yeah, I mean, I echo what Joe said. I think it's a very delicate balance, and it's a choice you actually have to make as a leader, and people net all over the spectrum on that with their companies and their brands, for sure. Like, I think we can all think of examples across the board. So two things. I think one is it relates to D&I. Like, D&I is core to ThirdLove's brand. We built our brand around inclusivity. We kind of introduced the idea of inclusivity to a space that hadn't really showcased that before. So for us, that's core to who we are. It's core to what our customers know us to be and why our team works at ThirdLove, right? And so I think as it relates to D&I, that made sense, and just that's a part of who we are. So there wasn't a leap of like where we would net. Now, interesting, like on politics, which we're obviously not going to get into, but I made this mistake. It's a funny story. Like a few years ago, 4 years ago, when Hilary lost, I sent an email to ThirdLove's customer base. And I basically said, I didn't talk about the election. I just said, I hope in the future we get a female president. Like, I do. I mean, I hope we all do here. Something like that. I mean, you wouldn't even believe. I mean, our customer service, they wanted to kill me. I mean, so many people unsubscribed. I mean, people really viewed it as me with a political statement as the CEO of ThirdLove. And so I do think, like, even if it's not what you were saying, people read it. They get their own context out of it. And again, like, we have a very diverse customer base in terms of political views, and we know that from the surveys we've done. So again, I think it's like, where do you want to be? And that's like a very personal question as a leader. So as it relates to certain things like that, like, there will be no statement coming from me after this election, either direction, right? Like, that's not something I'll do again. Just a learning.
Yeah. And that's perfect. With that in mind, and sort of advertising in that context, how do you approach something like the Stop Hate for Profit initiative that took place within the social channels this year?
Yeah, so we made the decision not to participate because there was a few reasons, but at the end of the day, like, coming off Facebook for a month does make a statement, and I could talk about Facebook for hours. I won't.
Sure.
However, even just like rewarming up your ads and getting things going again, like, it's detrimental to the business, you know? And so we put the business first. And again, like other companies, that's not how they stack rank, right? You know, if I'm Tom's, like, that's not what I believe goes first. But for us, that was the decision we made, not because we didn't believe in it. I thought it was a great initiative. It didn't make sense for us as a business.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think you touched on the fact that you're never going to please everybody. And so you've got to maintain your hierarchy and priority of focus through and through.
Yeah, just if I can piggyback on Heidi. I mean, as a digitally native company, we are highly dependent on the largest channels, you know, being the Facebook network and the Google network. And there's a basic premise on consumer-centric businesses, which all of us are here, and that's meet your customer on their terms, where they are, where they want to engage with you. And this is where the majority of our consumers begin their journey with us for a whole lot of reasons that are far beyond us. I mean, we're just businesses that grew up where there's a different shopping mall, a different retail center, a different town square, a different way to engage, and this is where it happens to be. For a large brand, and I'm not picking on these are great brands like Coke or McDonald's, to pull back from a channel like this, it's, to say it would have zero impact would be silly, but it's not going to be something that they've got to file a public filing on a warning that they're going to miss their numbers for the quarter. For brands like ours, for us to drop for a month means we're going to miss our numbers, period. It would be very, very detrimental to us. Now, if our customers left, we'd go with them. We'd go to where they go and we'd be there with them their way. And if it's a joint journey we take with them, we'll do that too. But I think it's there's nuance to this, and perhaps what I'm saying could be viewed contentiously, but really at our core, we try really hard to know who our customer is and be there with them. And this, these are the places where we need to be.
Yeah. And I think, like you said, go where your customers are, and satisfying the needs of your customers in that sense is a great perspective. Hilary, I want to ask you, we've got, as you look at hims and hers and the market in which you're sitting, like you said, it's telemedicine, it's also D2C products, and you're very nimble. As a strength of most D2C is a very nimble company able to make pivots quickly. A huge strength. And I know you guys offered a COVID test as part of kind of your brand offering within this time. As you're growing and becoming larger, are those pivots becoming harder? And how are you navigating making those decisions and changes as you are becoming a larger and larger company?
Well, definitely moving to remote first means extra over communication, but I have to say, and this is part of the motivation for us moving to remote full time, we have not been as agile and as productive since before we launched the company, when we were just swimming and hoping for survival. So It has been an unbelievable year. We've been so proud of how our employees have risen to the challenge of just iterating so quickly and developing so quickly. And I think part of that comes from this mission-driven piece of it, where this year, suddenly the line between employees and humans isn't there so much anymore. You're showing up and you're bringing all of your home and all of this into the workplace. And in that way, for healthcare, it's been specifically super, super noticeable. And so COVID tests, for example, yes, it was important for us to be able to launch COVID tests so that we could bring that signature end-to-end, high quality, transparent healthcare support that we've become known for in so many other categories. But it also came out of conversations with our employees who were saying, my mom can't get a COVID test. She's high at risk and it's impossible where she lives. And when you can't abstract out with healthcare, it's the most emotional piece. And so I think that has really, in hearing directly from our consumers, which again is the huge benefit of being a D2C company, has really driven the product roadmap. And so we pivoted a decent amount this year and accelerated a lot of our roadmap launches in direct response to what we were hearing from our customers, and by virtue of what our employees were seeing within their own communities. And so I'm super proud of what we brought to market, which was primary care. So we launched primary care for the first time for dozens of conditions. It's only $39 versus $200 to $300, which you'll pay broadly in this country. We launched it again a few weeks later for Spanish speakers, because again, language is another barrier that gets overlooked so often in healthcare. We launched COVID tests, as you said. So again, bringing that end-to-end support and transparency, which was so missing and so needed, and unfortunately has not gotten a lot better 6 months down the line. And then mental health, which has been a personal passion project of mine since before we launched the company. It was always on the roadmap, but just seeing the staggering numbers of individuals who are struggling, I kind of liken it to when the tide comes out and you see what was lurking beneath the surface. And so whether it is loneliness or addiction issues or depression or anxiety, you have people struggling at a rate they were not struggling before, and really testing their resilience. And so our ability to quickly bring to market a free therapy, group therapy offering, and then as well a one-on-one psychiatry offering where you can get medication shipped directly to your door, was just at a third of the price of traditional services, were ways that we felt we could support the incredible resilient stories we were hearing from our consumers.
That's awesome. And maybe as a quick follow-up to that, I know some of these topics, as you're laying them out, like they're not easy topics. They're uncomfortable in some cases for even the consumer in that standpoint who's in need of these services to talk about or to raise their hand and ask for help in that sense. Your brand, I should say, has done a really great job of making that marketing or that message a little bit more personal, in a humorous way. How have you crafted that in a way that balances that uncomfortable but also necessity in the product?
Right. So we believe sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? And the more you can talk about things and make people feel like they're not so alone, and that, in a way you're not special, if that makes sense. You're not the only one who's dealing with, who has weird acne on their shoulder they've never seen before, or, is struggling with anxiety that's not going away the way it used to maybe when they were younger. And so the more we can make people feel like they're included, feel like they're seen, and that's really where representation matters a lot in our ad creative, and feel understood, I think, has been a key piece. And so we haven't been afraid to push the boundaries. And it's funny, when you asked about how founders can remain separate from what's best for the brand, I feel like that really hits home for me, because I'm, in my personal life, a very mild-mannered Canadian, but as Andrew, who's our CEO and my co-founder, always teases me, I have generally been responsible for the most provocative of the campaigns that we've launched. And I think it's just been so core to what we see, and the conversations we had in the early days of fundraising, where we'd say, no one wants to be the one to ask the first question about erectile dysfunction. But when you lead, or balding, but when you lead with something that says, two-thirds of the men in this room are likely to suffer from one of these conditions, all of a sudden it goes, oh, and then the ice breaks, and then we can talk to it, and then we can address it. But if we can't talk about it, we can't address it.
Yeah, I think that hit the nail, right on the head. I love what you guys have done. I know we've got about 4 minutes left in our panel. I wanted to switch gears quickly to talk about the trends that we're seeing in the ecosystem now. Are they long lasting? Are there short-term pivots and changes that your companies are making? And how do you plan for the future in a post-COVID world? And Heidi, I'll start with you.
Oh, I wish I knew the answers to all these questions. Don't you? Yeah, I think we don't know what we don't know. I think some learnings have been obviously kind of where you led the conversation in the beginning. Everyone is advertising online. Everyone is growing their e-commerce business, whether you're 100% online or only partially. And so the noise for the consumer, to me, is, I thought it was noisy last year. It's just incredible, the amount of conversations going on. And so to me, the biggest challenge, like for us, as we think about, and my mind's in 2021 already, I'm ready to get out of this year, as aren't we all?
Aren't we all? Exactly.
I'm like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? No, we're not. We still have Q4. Okay. But yeah, so I think it's really about differentiation, and for us, like specifically, like if I look at the space when we entered and launched in 2014, D2C wasn't a term. There weren't, inclusivity in lingerie wasn't really happening. And now today that's table stakes. So the basis, the level of the players just in our distinct space is different. So we need to be the innovator again. And that's always a challenge. It's exciting, but it's a challenge to be the one innovating in any space. And yeah, so I think that to me is like the crux of for all of us, is even we're all competing, right, for consumers' attentions on different topics. So
yeah, keep disrupting, keep innovating, staying nimble and differentiating your product. Joe, what are your thoughts there? I know you've been in this space for a long time. I'd call you a veteran in the D2C world. How do you foresee the future and keeping your brand relevant in the face of not only the D2C competitors, but also in the, you're competing with traditional brands as well?
Yeah, I'll echo Heidi. There's probably more uncertainty right now and directions things could go. I mean, just even piling on uncertain holiday consumer behaviors, uncertain election, and uncertain pandemic timeline and response. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty in our future, which makes forecasting and planning a whole lot of fun. Some of it is we're learning. I mean, Hilary talked to this. How do we get more back to our nimble roots? We've gotten big, but that doesn't mean we have to be rigid, and making sure that we have a lot of flexibility and can adapt as we see opportunity. And I think we're getting better and better at that. I will go on the record and say there's no way things are going back to the way they were pre-COVID. I mean, any transformative global event, whether it was 9/11 or recessions, or you come out of it different than when you started. And I think in the case of digitally native brands, we've got some disruptive brands here that have been traditionally fairly brick and mortar channel led and or equivalent physical led, and mattress on the premium side is no different, where typically 85 to 90% of mattresses sold were through a retail brick and mortar establishment. That's pivoted, and it pivoted a lot, of course, out of necessity. But will it go back to where it was? It's hard to imagine that, and I think that changes how consumers are going to engage, where they're going to learn, how they're going to think about purchasing, both in more addressable market that's available, but it impacts brands and share and market size and these things as well. So I view that as an accelerant, something that was inevitable, just perhaps years from now has come forward, and you have to bring that into your planning as you look forward, because it is going to be different than it was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe we're right at time. So I will thank all the panelists, Hilary, Joe, Heidi. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think your insights are invaluable. And thank you for taking the time.